At 70, the beloved Mr. Bean star Rowan Atkinson has revealed something no one was prepared to hear, and fans around the world are devastated. For decades, Rowan made millions laugh without saying a word. But behind that iconic character was a struggle he kept hidden from the public eye. Now, as he reaches 70, new heartbreaking details about his personal battles, his health, and the price of global fame have finally come to light. Those closest to him say this may be the most difficult chapter of his life, and the truth will leave you stunned. For more than 3 decades, Rowan Atkinson has been one of the world's most beloved comedians, a man whose face alone could bring laughter without saying a single word. His character Mr. Bean became a global icon, transcending language, age, and culture. Yet as Rowan turned 70, the image of the cheerful, clumsy, childlike character hid a truth far more painful than anyone imagined. Behind the scenes, Rowan carried a weight that he rarely showed the world, a burden built from pressure, perfectionism, and years of personal struggle. While fans saw a carefree character stumbling through life with wide-eyed innocence, Rowan himself was facing challenges that slowly took a serious toll on his physical and emotional well-being. Rowan's journey has always been intertwined with the expectations placed on him. From the moment Mr. Bean skyrocketed to global fame, he found himself living inside a role that audiences refused to let him outgrow. Directors, producers, even fans on the street looked at Rowan and saw Bean not the deeply serious, introverted, and intensely private man he truly was. Over time, that disconnect began to affect him more profoundly than people realized. What many don't know is that Rowan Atkinson has long battled severe anxiety, something that made performing, traveling, and even everyday life increasingly difficult. The pressure of keeping up the same level of physical comedy, the same expressions, the same silliness that people expected from Mr. Bean was exhausting. Rowan once admitted privately to friends that the character became both a blessing and a cage. He loved the success, but the weight of living up to it as the years passed became overwhelming. By the time he reached 70, the effects of stress and age began catching up with him. Those close to Rowan say he has been quietly navigating health issues he refuses to publicly discuss, choosing instead to step back from the spotlight and spend more time with his children and partner. While he has always guarded his privacy fiercely, insiders revealed that recent health scares shook him more deeply than at any other point in his life. Rowan also struggled with the emotional fallout of major changes in his personal life. His divorce from Sunetra Sastry, after more than 2 decades of marriage, left lasting scars. Though he never spoke openly about it, those around him say the split took an emotional toll he never expected. It reshaped his family, his routine, and his sense of stability. Even after finding happiness again with Louise Ford, he carried quiet guilt and lingering pain that surfaced more strongly with age. Friends noticed that Rowan became far more reflective in recent years, spending more time alone, avoiding events, and distancing himself from the fast-paced entertainment world he once dominated. He stopped taking on roles that demanded the old Bean-style energy and shifted toward smaller, more manageable projects. Some insiders say this was not a creative decision, but a necessity. His body simply couldn't handle the demanding physical comedy anymore. But perhaps the most heartbreaking part is Rowan's belief that the world no longer wants to see him, only the character he created. As he aged and struggled with health and anxiety, he feared letting fans down by not being able to perform as before. This silent fear, buried under decades of expectation, became a heavy emotional weight, one he rarely spoke about, even with those closest to him. Now, at 70, Rowan finds himself at a crossroads. The man who built a career on timeless physical comedy is facing the reality of time catching up with him. And while he remains deeply loved worldwide, the truth behind his recent struggles has left fans heartbroken. Rowan Atkinson gave the world laughter and, in the process, endured pain that few ever knew existed. As Rowan Atkinson moved into his early 70s, the changes became impossible to ignore, especially for the people who had worked with him for decades. Though he never complained publicly, insiders quietly noticed the physical and emotional strain slowly tightening its grip on him. For a man who built his career on agility, precision, and split-second comedic timing. Even small declines felt monumental. Those closest to Rowan recall that the first signs appeared during filming schedules. He began needing longer breaks between physical scenes, something he once prided himself on never requiring. Mr. Bean's signature moves exaggerated stumbles, sudden jumps, wide-eyed reactions had once been effortless, but now the demands of age were creeping in. Standing for long periods, repeatedly performing physical gags, or enduring multiple takes drained him far more than before. Producers who worked with him in recent years revealed that Rowan would sometimes insist on rewriting scenes to reduce the physicality. It wasn't ego or laziness, it was necessity. He understood his limits, and while he hated to admit them, he knew pushing too hard could lead to serious consequences. One source described a moment during a private rehearsal that left the entire team shaken. Rowan attempted a simple pratfall, something he had perfected thousands of times. But instead of landing safely, he lost his balance in a way that frightened everyone watching. He laughed it off, as he often did, but those around him noticed his hand trembling afterward. It was a quiet reminder that time is undefeated. Even for the greatest physical comedians of all time, the emotional toll was just as heavy. Rowan has always been intensely self-critical, but age amplified his fears. He began questioning whether he should continue acting at all. Friends say he worried that audiences would compare his older performances to the brilliance of his youth, an unfair comparison, but one that weighed on him relentlessly. His anxiety, which he had kept under control for decades, worsened. Small tasks, traveling for work, attending press events, meeting fans, became daunting. Rowan started turning down invitations, avoiding appearances, and isolating himself more than ever before. Even in private gatherings, he seemed quieter, more withdrawn, as though he were carrying a secret burden he didn't want anyone to see professionally. Opportunities kept coming. Directors and studios wanted him for reboots, cameos, animated projects, fan events, anything with the Bean name attached. But Rowan declined many of them, often choosing silence over explanation. Insiders say he feared that attempting to be Bean again would reveal just how much he had changed physically. He didn't want pity. He didn't want to disappoint. He preferred to step back gracefully rather than struggle in public. Even more heartbreaking is Rowan's private confession to a colleague. "I don't want the last memory people have of me to be a tired old man trying to play a character who belongs to a different time." It was a raw, vulnerable admission from someone who spent his life making others laugh. Meanwhile, his health concerns continued growing, though never publicly confirmed. Several reports indicate he has been dealing with issues related to stress, mobility, and chronic fatigue. Rowan became more protective of his schedule, avoiding long filming days and physically demanding roles. Some insiders say he has quietly made peace with the fact that his body can no longer support the style of comedy that made him a legend. Despite his withdrawal from the spotlight, the love from fans remained overwhelming, and sometimes overwhelming in the wrong way. People expected the same boundless energy, the same expressions, the same youthfulness of Mr. Bean. Rowan felt the pressure every time he was recognized in public, and at 70, that pressure weighed heavier than ever for a man who spent his life giving joy. The irony was painful. The world still wanted Mr. Bean, but Rowan himself was struggling more than ever before. And behind his quiet smile was a truth he could no longer hide, the truth that age, anxiety, and health struggles were slowly forcing him to let go of the character that defined his entire career. Behind the laughter and the iconic face of Mr. Bean, Rowan Atkinson carried battles few knew existed. For decades, he maintained a carefully crafted public persona, quirky, clever, and eternally mischievous. But in private, the reality was far more complex. At 70, these personal struggles became harder to conceal. Even from those closest to him, Rowan's anxiety had always been a quiet companion, lingering beneath the surface while he performed for millions. It wasn't the sort of fear that stopped him from working, it was subtler, more insidious. Every decision, every scene, and even casual interactions carried a weight of internal scrutiny. He often worried about making mistakes, disappointing fans, or being unable to live up to his own legacy. Over the years, that pressure built, layer upon layer, until it became almost suffocating. Friends recall how Rowan's private life became increasingly isolated. He treasured solitude, yes, but it was also a way to cope with the constant scrutiny and expectations. Simple tasks, such as attending social events or public appearances, could trigger intense stress. Even in familiar circles, he sometimes felt like he had to perform not as himself, but as the character everyone adored. The constant oscillation between the man he truly was and the persona the world wanted to see weighed heavily on him. On top of emotional strain, Rowan faced physical health challenges. Years of performing slapstick, comedy jumping, falling, and exaggerated movements had left his body worn. Though he masked it with his trademark humor, there were days when pain made rehearsals unbearable. Colleagues noticed him pacing differently, moving more cautiously, and taking longer to recover after even minor physical activity. For someone whose craft relied so heavily on physicality, these changes were deeply frustrating and emotionally taxing. The impact on Rowan's personal relationships was equally profound. After his divorce from Sunetra Sastry, he struggled to balance his professional obligations with family life. He became fiercely protective of his privacy, wary of the media, and careful about whom he trusted. While he eventually found companionship with Louise Ford, the shadow of past heartbreak lingered. Maintaining connections with friends, family, and colleagues required enormous energy, which often left him exhausted. One of the most heartbreaking aspects of Rowan's struggle was his fear of disappointing fans. Though the world adored him, he often felt he could never meet their expectations. Each performance carried an invisible weight, a fear that the audience might see him as tired, older, or less nimble than before. The pressure to uphold a decades-old image created an internal battle between self-preservation and the desire to continue bringing joy to millions. Despite these struggles, Rowan Atkinson never stopped caring about his work. His passion for performance, storytelling, and comedy remained intact. What changed was how he approached it. He became selective with projects, prioritizing roles that allowed him to perform at his best without overextending himself. The man who once thrived on chaotic physical comedy had learned the importance of pacing, moderation, and self-preservation. At 70, Rowan's personal battles, anxiety, health, and the weight of fame paint a picture of a man who gave the world so much laughter, while quietly carrying a heavy burden. Behind every iconic moment, there was struggle, discipline, and resilience. And though fans may never fully understand the depth of what he endured, Rowan's journey reminds us that even those who make us laugh the hardest may be fighting the toughest battles behind the curtain. By the time Rowan Atkinson reached 70, he had spent decades giving the world laughter, joy, and unforgettable moments. From the silent genius of Mr. Bean to the sharp wit of Blackadder, his talent had touched millions, making him a household name across generations. But fame, applause, and accolades could never fill the quiet void of personal struggle, nor erase the weight of anxiety, health concerns, and the relentless pressure of expectation that had shadowed him for years. In recent times, Rowan began to take deliberate steps toward finding peace, a careful balancing act between his legendary career and the life he needed to live for himself. He started saying no to roles that demanded extreme physical comedy, choosing instead smaller, meaningful projects that allowed him to express his craft without compromising his well-being. He spent more time with loved ones, strengthening bonds with family and close friends, and nurturing the quieter aspects of life he had often sacrificed to the demands of fame. Fans may never fully realize the internal battles Rowan faced, but those who worked closely with him know that his resilience and determination never faltered. Despite health setbacks and the emotional toll of a lifetime in the public eye, he remained deeply committed to the art he loved. The laughter he inspired was no accident. It was the result of tireless dedication, endless practice, and a profound understanding of human emotion and timing. Yet, peace came not just from slowing down professionally, it came from acceptance. Rowan began to embrace the passage of time, understanding that aging does not diminish talent or value. He found comfort in knowing that Mr. Bean was not gone. It had become a timeless legacy, a gift to the world that would endure long after the final curtain. And in accepting his own limitations, he discovered freedom, freedom to live authentically, to focus on health and family, and to enjoy the quiet joys that fame often overshadowed. There were still moments of melancholy. Rowan occasionally reflected on the pressures of his past, the expectations of fans, and the challenges of maintaining a career built on physical comedy. But those reflections no longer defined him. Instead, they became reminders of his strength, perseverance, and the extraordinary life he had led. Rowan Atkinson's story at 70 is one of contrast, the public image of a beloved comedian, and the private reality of a man navigating health, anxiety, and change. It is a story of resilience, humility, and the quiet courage it takes to step away when necessary without ever abandoning the legacy that made him immortal. As he looks to the future, Rowan continues to inspire not just through laughter, but through his courage in facing life's challenges head-on. The world may remember him as Mr. Bean, the comic genius who could make anyone laugh with a single look. But those who know him best see something even more remarkable, a man who endured, adapted, and ultimately found peace in a life devoted to joy. Even when it came at a personal cost, the laughter lives on. But so does the quiet strength of Rowan Atkinson, a legacy far deeper than anyone could have imagined.